Okay, it's another edition of the Penn State Blitz. We're here in 2020. We're going to talk about Penn State's 11-2 season, a Cotton Bowl win, and a new offensive coordinator. We're going to talk about what happened to Matt Limegrover, the former Penn State offensive line coach, Penn State's talented underclassmen, who left, who stayed, and we're going to finish with the Penn State mailbag. All right, Greg Pickle. I don't know where we start. I mean, first of all,
a busy start to 2020.
I can't believe it's only been like a couple of days since the Cotton Bowl with all that's happened.
Right.
But I'm not sure what the biggest news is. There's been so much news. Why don't we just start with the Cotton Bowl? We can start with that. It was Tyler Bowen, the interim offensive coordinator, calling the plays with the new offensive coordinator, Kirk Ciarrocca, from Redland High School. I said that right, didn't I?
Yes.
Looking on. It was a shootout. Penn State finally put it away with the running game to finish 11-2. I don't know that a lot of people saw an 11-win season for Penn State this year. Yeah. We could get to all of that. But just what's your overwhelming take as you think about the Cotton Bowl in AT&T Stadium where they subdued Memphis finally with the running game? What jumps out to you the most?
Yeah, I think the thing that really struck me was that once Tyler Bowen decided to stick with the run, Penn State's offense really couldn't be stopped, and that was really the story of that game. You know, I think KJ Hamler was the leading receiver with 2 catches for 46 yards. I mean, it was not the kind of game where the passing attack was going to light it up, and they didn't need it to be that kind of game. I think going into it, you had written about it that the front 7 of Memphis versus Penn State's running game was a major advantage in Penn State's favor. James Franklin said afterwards that there were times when he felt like he had to get on the headset and say, hey, let's not forget to run the ball because we have a tremendous advantage there. And I guess the funny thing to me was, and even though Devin Ford only had a couple carries, but for all of the talk about the 4-man running back rotation, it certainly worked out pretty well in Dallas end of the season.
It sure did. Journey Brown, a Penn State bowl game record. I think it was 202 yards.
Yep.
His first carry, the only run in 10 plays for Penn State to start the game. A very physical touchdown run in which he just trampled a couple of Memphis Tigers. Yeah. Very early sign that Penn State's running backs and also the offensive line were going to be able to take control of this game. It's weird to see they scored 53 points. And they didn't really make a lot of plays or any plays, really, in the passing game. It was all about the run. Yep. It really was all about the running game kind of down the stretch with Sean Clifford kind of ailing, and that he just wasn't 100%. They leaned on that a lot. He played in the game. He did some okay things, but I think you could tell he was a little bit rusty. I do feel like if we're going to talk about the Cotton Bowl, we probably should talk about Micah Parsons, Penn State's linebacker, who really was the best player on the field. As good as Journey Brown was, I don't think Penn State's going to win that game if Micah doesn't do some superhuman things. He was the most outstanding defensive player, deservedly so. 14 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, forced interception. I think there was a quarterback hit in there, 2 pass breakups. He almost had an interception for a pick 6. Did it even surprise you how good he played in that game?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I think everyone knows how talented he is, but that was a kind of game that puts a guy on a national stage heading into his junior season. And look, as a consensus All-American, certainly he was, his season was well received from a national perspective, but you know, I don't know if you were hearing a ton of buzz about him, but to do that in a New Year's Six game, hours before the 2 college football playoff semifinals, it really set the tone of what he can do and what Penn State can do in 2020. Obviously, the draft talk will start pretty soon because he's going to be a junior and eligible to leave after next season. So, you know, we have a whole calendar year to worry about that. But the Heisman Trophy hype train might start too. And, you know, he didn't win the Butkus Award this year, but he's certainly going to be among the favorites to do it this year.
And what you're seeing from him really is his evolution as a linebacker, especially with what he can do with his speed and size at 6'3", 245 pounds, either on the blitz or just as a pure pass rusher. His only kryptonite is he just can't catch the ball yet. He probably had 4 or 5 interceptions in his hands this year. He doesn't have one yet at Penn State. I think that's going to change. He's just a terrific athlete. Can't talk enough about him. We're going to be talking a lot about him in 2020. And also, before we move on from the Cotton Bowl, we got to talk about the new offensive coordinator with Ricky Ronnie, the former offensive coordinator at Old Dominion. They choose a guy with roots from the Harrisburg area in Kirk Ciarrocca, the Minnesota offensive coordinator who did some good things when Minnesota upset Penn State with the RPO, the pass game, the run game, got a lot out of the quarterback. What's your first kind of read on him and what he might mean to Penn State?
Well, the first thing would be that you're right. The run-pass option, the spread that he runs, it baffled Penn State. And I think one of the takeaways I had after that game was how come it works so effectively for Minnesota, but Penn State doing a lot of the same concepts can't seem to trick defenses as well or get defenses thinking as well. And honestly, I think part of it is when you even Trace McSorley got much better at it, and Sean Clifford's improved throughout the year, but Tanner Morgan was cerebral when it came to not only being, not only hiding the ball, but also reading things quickly and making the right decision. I mean, he didn't make a bad throw, hardly any bad throws in that game, and I don't think he had any bad decisions. Now, you have to get Sean Clifford to that point, and I think that's Kirk Ciarrocca's or, Will Levis. So I'm assuming Clifford will be the starter next year, but who knows what will happen over the next 8 months. But, I think you have to get Clifford to that point of saying, hey, you have to make defenses really work at this, because even if you don't have the best skill players, you can obviously make guys look better if they're wide open running down the field. So I think that was probably the biggest takeaway for me, is watching how effective and efficient that Minnesota offense was, and even continued to be in the bowl win over Auburn. That's the kind of thing that can help Penn State go to the next level with him at leading the offense.
Okay, so they have a new offensive coordinator, and as we are talking about this now, they are in the market for a new offensive line coach. Matt Limegrover, contract was not renewed after 4 seasons.
Nice way of putting it.
Yes, he took over in 2016, 17, 18, and 19. When you look at the growth of the Penn State offensive line, I think there was a lot of good. I think he definitely developed some players. But I think ultimately there's a couple things to think about. Usually the new OC has his thoughts about what he wants from his offensive line coach, and he probably has a preference. And also I think there's more to being an offensive line coach than just developing offensive linemen. There's a recruiting aspect, and there's also, Greg, what goes on in games. Can the offensive line coach make adjustments quick enough to really, kind of counter whatever a defense is doing at the start of the game? I think that all kind of goes with being a good offensive line coach. When you think about Matt Limegrover, do you think he did all 3 good enough to satisfy James Franklin?
No, I mean, the easy answer is no, because he would have had his contract renewed otherwise. But the thing that jumps out to me is I think he was well-liked by a lot of recruits and well-respected by recruits and high school coaches and players on the roster and James Franklin. But there's no doubt that when he came in here, he had one of the tougher position coach jobs of anyone, even though he came, at 2 seasons, and he came in 2016, so the 3rd year of the Franklin era. There were still a lot of problems that needed to be fixed on that line, a lot of recruiting depth that needed to be replaced. So I thought he did a nice job, but you just never felt like the next step was taken consistently. I think that's probably the biggest concern. Now, don't get me wrong, it could have nothing to do with performance and everything to do with Kirk Ciarrocca saying, hey, look, I need somebody that understands the way I do things. Part of me wonders too, and this is just my opinion, something that I thought about, but Kirk Ciarrocca followed Matt Limegrover's time at Minnesota. They didn't overlap, but Limegrover came to Penn State in 16. Ciarrocca went in 17. You just wonder, I guess, if maybe some of what he saw on tape from Minnesota's offensive linemen in that point in time was stuff he didn't necessarily care for. I don't know. But clearly there was an emphasis or some kind of shift that needed to take place. And I think the question now is, Matt Limegrover did a lot for this program, but who can help take it to the next level that we endlessly talk about? Is it Tyler Bowen? Do they slide him over from the tight ends job? He was the offensive line coach at Maryland. Or do they keep him there and go out and get a proven guy, maybe with ties to Ciarrocca, maybe not?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that I think you and I would agree that they cut ties with Limegrover, but it does look like the offensive line should be one of the top 2 or 3 strengths of this team in 2020 with 4 returning starters back. They're going to replace Steven Gonzalez, but they got Michael Mennett, Rasheed Walker, Mike Miranda, C.J. Thorpe, Will Fries, Des Holmes, and some other guys maybe that are younger, Caden Wallace, that they like. This should really be a very good offensive line, and I do think I do think there's something to be said for when a new offensive coordinator comes in. He's going to want guys he likes and guys that he feels comfortable with to implement his system. We'll see how it shakes out, but it does sure seem like this could be one of those decisions that was made with the future, obviously, in mind. Yeah. Speaking of the future, Penn State will be without a couple of very talented players in 2020 that could have played, but made the decision to leave for the NFL. Yetur Gross-Matos made the decision I think early in December that he was going to leave after 3 years at Penn State. Yep. Two-time first-team All-Big Ten choice. Didn't really surprise anyone. And the recent news on New Year's Eve night, I believe, that's right, that KJ Hamler, the redshirt sophomore wideout return man, was going to go to the NFL isn't really surprising. No. Either, when you look at both of their careers, what stands out?
Well, I think Yetur was, both of them really progressively got better. The thing that will always stick out to me with Hamler is not just the electric plays he made, but the fact that it said a lot about Penn State and James Franklin at the time that when he tore his ACL, the first game of his senior year in high school, everybody else pretty much backed off of him. Penn State believed in what he could do, believed that he would come through the recovery process fine, and lo and behold, he became a very successful player at Penn State and did a lot of things that, they accomplished a lot with him. There's no question about that. So that'll always be memorable to me. With Yetur, it was just it's striking to go look at the photos of him before he got, when he was in high school, and to look at him now and just how large of a human he is and some of the things he can do. I mean, the one-handed sack in the Cotton Bowl was just sort of the epitome of everything he's capable of. So neither of those were surprising, just like I don't think it was a shock that Michael Menet, Will Fries, Pat Freiermuth, and Tariq Castro-Fields have all decided to come back. Could you make an argument that those guys are NFL ready? Perhaps. Yeah. I think you could also make an argument with all of them, though, that one more season could definitely help bump their stock up. So now we just wait for, I guess, Shaka Toney, perhaps Lamont Wade, if they have anything to think about. But, those two guys are probably in that same boat, too. Yeah, I think Shaka definitely is still mulling his decision as we sit here right now and talk about it. And I think, I don't know. I was a little surprised that Tariq decided to come back, but I think the fact that he was inconsistent down the stretch really forced his hand. Shaka, I could still see going. Yeah, me too. For sure. I'm not sure about Lamont Wade and what he is thinking. I don't know that he's quite ready for the next level as a safety prospect, but we'll see. You never know between that and the transfer portal what's coming next, but we should have those decisions fairly quickly. I would say, though, with an eye towards the 2020 NFL draft in Yetur and KJ, I think Penn State's got two top 50 players in the NFL draft, and two that could go in the first round. I think Yetur's got a real shot. Some people think that KJ is so explosive that some team might also take a chance on him in the first round. It looks to me like he's in the Deshaun Jackson mold of player who can impact the return game and as a wideout as well. So we'll see. It should be a very interesting draft. But I do think that some of the people that decided to stay back at Penn State are really the story, especially Freiermuth. And I thought Menet really in the last month of the season in the bowl game played at an all Big Ten level. Agreed. Yeah, no, he was among their best players on offense, I think, in that stretch. There's no doubt. So before we get to the mailbag, we didn't do it at halftime of the Blitz. You were supposed to remind me. I know. I'll take the blame. It's my first mistake of many in 2020. I'll take the blame. I'll fall on the sword. Go ahead. Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to the Penn Live Penn State Blitz podcast. You can get it everywhere you get your audio. This episode is out a little bit later than normal, but more often than not, they're out Thursday morning, Wednesday night if you subscribe. So leave a comment, some feedback, and if you're watching on YouTube, it's youtube.com/allpennstate. So we're 3 quarters in, if you will, 3 downs in. So it's the Penn State mailbag. A lot of stuff happened during the bowl season. I'd say. Is there anything that you want to talk about maybe with regard to Ohio State, Clemson, or maybe Michigan, Alabama? I'm sure you had more than a rooting interest in both games. When you look at Penn State and the Big Ten in the bowl season, anything strike you? I just think that it's always interesting that when SEC teams don't show up, it's because they didn't want to be there. But when they win, that seems to be it's because the other team stinks. Now, don't get me wrong, Michigan was not great in that game against Alabama. I think Shea Patterson, if he tried to throw a football through the uprights, it would land outside the stadium. I don't know what he was doing. I mean, everything was airmailed. It was outrageous. I think FedEx charged him postage for most of those throws. But yeah, I mean, the Big Ten, as we record this, is 4-4 going into Indiana, Tennessee on Thursday night. I think I like Indiana in that game, by the way. Might be too late for this, but I think Tom Allen's going to have that team ready to go. Interesting bowl season. The most impressive thing, though, to me was how Minnesota just physically handled Auburn and didn't miss a beat without Kirk Ciarrocca there.
Yeah, and I have to say, I was Michigan just has not looked good, in any bowl game for a while. I will say that the Ohio State-Clemson game is one of the better bowl games I've ever seen that was played at a phenomenally high level. I know Buckeyes fans are upset about some of the calls in that game, and deservedly so. I'm sure Penn State fans are the other way are happy. One other thing, the Wisconsin game, I just thought two things stood out. They let that one get away with all those turnovers. And how about former Penn State receiver JaJuan Johnson
walking it off,
coming up big in that game, not only to kind of win the game, but I think probably get some attention for the NFL draft.
Yeah, I mean, he had a good season. I know that he had a couple of games where he really took off, and that sort of makes his season stats look a little bit better than maybe they are. But again, we've talked about it before. He's always looked the part. And there's times, you think back to the game-winning catch against Iowa at Penn State, that he looked like he was going to rank the next real thing, the next real deal. And it seems like getting out to Oregon sort of helped him clear his head a little bit. He's absolutely going to get drafted. I'm sure it'll be day 3. But, I mean, someone's going to fall in love with the physical features he has and the qualities that he's shown, and the good ones. And, he has no issues off the field that we're aware of. So, I mean, I think someone's going to take a chance on him. We'll see. But he's a day 3 guy at absolute worst.
Yeah. It's early, but I'll put you on the spot. As we look at 2020, can you give me 2 or 3 Penn State players you're really excited to see maybe for their next step? Obviously, I'm not talking about Micah or Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah.
But are there 2 or 3 players, maybe they were redshirted, that you kind of have your eye on with maybe what their next step is going to look like at Penn State as they get ready to assume a larger role?
I really think Caden Wallace is a guy who can come out and win a starting job on a very veteran-laden offensive line. I mean, they have just raved about him from day one. So I'll be curious to see if he can earn a starting spot by August.
Are we talking about Will Fries?
I mean, I think that, it depends what they want to do with him, guard or tackle. I mean, Miranda and Thorpe were part of a rotation. Maybe he surpasses both of those this offseason. I wouldn't put, don't get me wrong, I thought both those guys played pretty well. But, I mean, the Caden Wallace hype train certainly is rolling down the track. So I wouldn't be surprised if he sees pretty significant snaps. The other one that comes up is Lance Dixon defensively.
Good one.
I mean, I think he would have played in every game as Brandon Smith did had he not, kind of been in a weird place with so many good guys in front of him and Jordan Stout kicking touchbacks. So there was no real reason to use him on special teams. On offense, Bob, it's Keandre Lambert, the signee out of Virginia, the 4-star receiver.
Yeah.
This wide receiver group is kind of ripe for the picking. I mean, Jahan Dotson comes back, and I think he did a lot of nice things this year. But other than that, I mean, I think any of the younger receivers on this roster have a chance to come in and earn significant reps. And I like him a lot. Parker Washington's good, too. The older veteran receivers in this room better be on notice this offseason because there's at least 2 guys coming that are hungry to earn snaps this year.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the speed when Penn State has Micah Parsons, Brandon Smith, and Lance Dixon on the field at the same time with the linebacker group. I know Ellis Brooks is probably going to factor in there in the middle, maybe even as a starter. But those 3 linebackers, really, you could make a case for all of them as 5-stars. I don't know if Dixon was, but he was
very close. Yes.
Brandon Smith is ready. Micah is obviously ready. The one guy, when you talk about the wideouts, John Dunmore, I think is a guy that was redshirted that they like. If you remember, Greg, during the December practices and even in November, James Franklin and the staff were showing a lot of love to Daquan Hardy.
Yes.
Maybe in the return game he's undersized, but they said they saw the player they saw in high school who was so dominant, and I wonder maybe about what his role might be in 2020.
I think he'll have a big role, special teams, absolutely. All right, one for you, then we'll get out of here, move on to the next segment of the Blitz.
You going to ask me about Jerry World?
I was not considering it, but if you'd like to talk about it, you can take this question any way you like. All right, you have one suggestion to give to Kirk Ciarrocca, and he has to implement it in 2020. What is it? Is it an under center package so the quarterback can sneak on 4th and 1? That's all I want to know.
I think that, to me, one of the big storylines is how Penn State, manages the running back room.
You mean 6 4-stars could be a problem? What is it? 6
and a 5-star.
Yeah, right.
I wonder if maybe one of those guys is headed to the receiver room. What about Ricky Slade? Would Kirk think about doing that? But I just can't wait to see. I can't wait to see how that all plays out. Journey Brown and Noah Cain look like they are going to be just a very dynamic 1-2 punch. And I've heard that they are so high on Devin Ford that, this is going to always be this way. And, they were all able to stay healthy until the second half of the season, until Noah got hurt. But it's a formidable group. I think it's a good running back room as any in the country. It's a real strength. And I have no suggestions for Kirk Ciarrocca other than maybe suggest to James Franklin to have a better plan for the final minute of the first half with regard to using timeouts.